For the past year, Lisa had taken to online gaming like a moth to a flame. It was her new hobby, a world she eagerly escaped into after work. She'd always been tech-savvy, but this was different. The glow of her monitor was a constant presence in the evenings, accompanied by the click-clack of her mechanical keyboard. I didn't mind at first. After all, everyone needs a hobby, right? Besides, it was harmless. Or so I thought. I'd catch glimpses of her late-night gaming sessions as I passed by the study. She'd sit there, headset on, laughing at some inside joke her gaming group shared. "These are my teammates," she'd explain one night when I asked. "We're like a little squad. They help me level up." I wasn't exactly sold on the idea of her spending hours with strangers online, but Lisa seemed genuinely happy. That mattered. Our marriage had hit a monotonous phase, and maybe her gaming was just her way of spicing up her free time. But as time went on, things started to feel different. Lisa began spending more hours online, even during weekends when we usually had time to ourselves. She'd cancel movie nights, promising to make it up to me later. Dinner conversations grew shorter, and I'd often find her sneaking glances at her phone during meals, her fingers tapping away at messages I wasn't privy to. One day, while folding laundry, I found myself glancing at her phone on the counter. A message popped up. It was a notification from a chat app one didn't recognize. "Can't wait for later," it read, with a winking emoji at the end. I stood frozen. Was I overthinking this? Was I just being paranoid? Dismissing the uneasy feeling in my gut, I chalked it up to friendly banter. But that seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake it. A few weeks later, I decided to join her in her gaming world, not as a participant but as a spectator. Lisa seemed startled when I asked if I could watch her play. "You'll be bored out of your mind," she said with a nervous laugh. "It's not exactly thrilling." "Come on," I pressed. "I just want to see what all the fuss is about. Maybe I'll even join you sometime." "Sure," she relented, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I pulled up a chair beside her. She adjusted her camera angle and switched tabs hurriedly, landing on what appeared to be a game lobby. "So, this is it?" I asked. "Yep. Just waiting for the team to hop on," she said, her voice unusually tight. Her unease didn't escape me, but I didn't push. Little did I know, my curiosity would soon open a door I'd wish had stayed shut forever. At first, Lisa's late-night gaming didn't seem like a big deal. I brushed it off as a harmless hobby, figuring she'd eventually tire of it or find a balance between her virtual world and our life together. But as the weeks turned into months, it became clear that her priorities were shifting, and not in a way that included me. It started with the small things. Lisa would stay up until 2 or 3 in the morning, her laughter muffled through the walls as she chatted with her teammates. I'd go to bed alone, the other half of our bed growing colder with each passing night. "Just one more match," she'd say if I came to check on her. But one more match often turned into hours. In the mornings, she was irritable and groggy, barely saying a word to me before heading off to work. If I tried to bring up the topic, she'd wave it off. "It's just a phase," she'd assure me. "I'll cut back soon." But she didn't. Lisa's obsession with gaming seeped into every corner of our lives. Weekend plans were canceled last minute because her team needed her. Date nights turned into awkward dinners where she'd spend more time on her phone than engaging with me. I'd sit across the table, watching her face light up as a notification pinged, her thumbs flying across the screen. "Just the squad," she'd say with a quick smile. It wasn't long before the tension began to build between us. I tried to be understanding, but it felt like I was competing with something I couldn't match. A virtual world filled with excitement and camaraderie that I couldn't provide. One night, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, her phone buzzed again. She picked it up without hesitation, her attention completely diverted from the screen. "Really, Lisa?" I said, unable to keep the frustration out of my voice. "What?" she replied, not even looking up. "Can't you go one evening without checking your phone?" She sighed dramatically, setting her phone down. "It's just a message. Don't make a big deal out of it." "It's always just a message," I shot back. "But you're glued to that thing all the time." It's like I don't even exist anymore when you're playing those games. That's not fair, she snapped, crossing her arms. I have a right to unwind. You don't complain when you're watching sports or working late. This isn't the same and you know it, I argued. You're shutting me out, Lisa. When's the last time we actually spent time together? Just us? She opened her mouth to respond but then closed it, as if realizing she didn't have an answer. Instead, she grabbed her phone and stormed off to the study. I sat there in silence, the hum of the muted TV filling the void. A part of me wanted to follow her, to try and fix whatever was breaking between us. But another part, a quieter yet stronger part, told me that I shouldn't have to beg for her attention. The distance between us grew in the following weeks. Conversations turned into clipped exchanges. Meals together became rare, and when we did sit down, it was like we were two strangers sharing a table. Even the intimacy that once brought us closer began to fade. I couldn't understand it. We'd been through rough patches before, but this was different. Lisa wasn't just distracted. She was disengaged. It felt as if she was living a double life, one with me and another in her online world. One evening, I decided to confront her again. Lisa, we need to talk, I said as she booted up her computer. Not now, she replied without turning around. Yes, now, I insisted, stepping into the room. This can't keep going on. We're falling apart, and you don't even seem to care. She finally turned to face me, her expression a mixture of guilt and irritation. What do you want me to say? That I'm sorry? That I'll quit gaming? Because I can't promise that. I don't need you to quit, I said, my voice shaking. I need you to meet me halfway. I need my wife back, Lisa. Her eyes softened for a moment, but then she turned back to her screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. I'll try, she muttered. But you need to stop making this a bigger deal than it is. I walked away, feeling more defeated than ever. Lisa might have said she'd try, but deep down, I knew things wouldn't change, and I had no idea how much worse they were about to get. It had been about a week since our last argument, and things had settled into an uneasy truce. Lisa still spent her nights gaming, but she'd made a small effort to eat dinner with me or watch a show here and there. I clung to the hope that these were signs she was trying to rebuild what had been crumbling between us. But one night, everything changed. I was up late, unable to sleep, tossing and turning in our empty bed. Lisa was, as always, in her study. The faint hum of her computer and the murmur of her voice carried through the walls. I glanced at the clock. 1:42 a.m. I told myself to let it go. I'd been trying to give her space, trying not to let my frustrations boil over again. But something felt off that night, an instinct I couldn't shake. Maybe it was the nervous laugh I'd heard earlier, the way her voice dropped into hushed tones when I walked past the room. Unable to resist, I got up and padded quietly down the hall. Her door was ajar, just enough for me to peer inside. What I saw froze me in my tracks. Lisa was sitting at her desk, completely naked, her posture relaxed as if this were the most natural thing in the world. The light from her screen illuminated her face, her lips curved in a flirtatious smile. On the monitor, another camera feed was displayed. An equally naked man, his expression smug as they exchanged muted words I couldn't hear. My chest tightened. My breath caught. It felt like the ground beneath me had disappeared, leaving me weightless and sinking all at once. I wanted to scream, to storm in and demand answers, but my body refused to move. Finally, I snapped out of my paralysis. What the hell is this? I roared, slamming the door open with such force that it banged against the wall. Lisa's head whipped around, her face draining of color. She scrambled to cover herself, fumbling for the robe draped over her chair. It's not what it looks like, she stammered, her voice trembling. Not what it looks like? I laughed bitterly, the sound raw and hollow. You're sitting naked in front of a camera, Lisa. What exactly am I supposed to think? The man on the screen smirked and said something, but I didn't care enough to listen. All I could see was Lisa's betrayal, her flushed cheeks, her panicked eyes. Turn it off, I barked, my voice shaking with fury. Support the channel with a subscription, it really makes a difference. Wait, let me explain, she pleaded, but I was done. Without thinking, I grabbed her computer tower and yanked it off the desk. It hit the floor with a crash, wires snapping, the screen flickering out as the connection broke. Lisa screamed, reaching out as if she could save it, but it was too late. Do you even understand what you've done? I shouted, my anger spilling out in waves. You've destroyed everything we built, Lisa. Everything. She sat there, her robe clutched around her, tears streaming down her face. It's not like that, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't. I cut her off. Don't insult me with excuses. I can't even look at you right now. I stormed out of the room, my fists clenched, my head pounding. Behind me, I could hear Lisa sobbing, but her tears couldn't touch the rage and heartbreak burning inside me. I couldn't stay in the house after that night. It felt contaminated, every corner whispering reminders of what I'd seen. I packed a bag and left within an hour, not caring where I went. The motel I ended up at wasn't much, just a cramped room with peeling wallpaper and a bed that creaked under my weight. But it was quiet, and most importantly, it wasn't home. The first few days were a blur. Anger, disbelief, and sadness swirled inside me, each emotion fighting for dominance. I replayed the scene in my head over and over, torturing myself with questions that had no answers. How could she do this? Was I not enough? Had she been lying to me all along? Lisa called me relentlessly. My phone buzzed with her name every few minutes, but I couldn't bring myself to answer. I'd glance at the screen, my stomach twisting, and then toss the phone aside. When the calls stopped, the messages started. At first, they were frantic. Please talk to me. I need to explain. You don't understand what you saw. Just give me a chance to explain. Then came the apologies. I'm so sorry. I messed up. Please, we can fix this. It was a mistake. I swear it'll never happen again. But I ignored them all. I couldn't face her. A week passed then too. I tried to throw myself into work, taking on extra hours to avoid the silence of the motel room. Nights were the worst. Alone with my thoughts, I'd lie awake, staring at the cracked ceiling, haunted by the image of Lisa and that man. By the third week, Lisa's tone shifted. She wasn't just apologizing anymore. She was pleading. One message in particular stuck with me. It wasn't what you think, okay? It wasn't even real. It was for money. A one-time thing. Please, believe me. Money? The word made me pause. What did that even mean? Was she saying this was some kind of transaction? The thought disgusted me, but it also made me curious. Against my better judgment, I called her. The line connected almost instantly, her voice trembling as she answered. You called? She said, barely above a whisper. Start talking, I said coldly. And don't lie to me. She hesitated for a moment before launching into her explanation. It wasn't what it looked like, she began, her words tumbling over each other. I know how bad it seemed, but I wasn't doing it because I wanted to. Someone reached out to me online, offered me money. A lot of money. I thought it could help us. Help us? I scoffed. And you didn't think to discuss this brilliant idea with me first? I was ashamed, she cried. I knew you'd never agree, but it was just one time, I swear. I thought I could handle it, that it wouldn't mean anything. I didn't think you'd find out. I let her words hang in the air, my grip tightening on the phone. Do you even hear yourself, Lisa? You sold yourself out, our marriage, for what? A few $1,000s? It was a mistake, she said, her voice breaking. A terrible, stupid mistake. But it's over now. Please come home. Let's talk about this in person. Why should I believe you? I asked, my voice low and trembling with anger. How do I know this was a one-time mistake? How do I know there weren't others? There weren't, she insisted. I promise you there weren't. I hate myself for what I did. I hate that I hurt you. But I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. I didn't respond. Her sobs filled the silence, each one tugging at a part of me that still wanted to believe her. "I'll never forgive myself," she continued. "But please, don't throw everything away because of one stupid, desperate choice. We can get through this. I'll make it up to you. I'll prove to you that I'm still the woman you fell in love with." I hung up without saying another word. Over the next month, Lisa doubled down on her efforts to win me back. She sent letters, left voicemails, and even got our mutual friends involved, asking them to tell me how much she regretted her actions. Every message carried the same promise. It was a one-time mistake, she'd been blinded by the money, and she'd do whatever it took to make things right. I wanted to believe her, but the betrayal was a heavy weight on my chest. Could I trust her again? Could I even look at her without seeing that moment replaying in my mind? As the weeks stretched on, my resolve began to waver. The anger that had sustained me started to give way to exhaustion. I missed my home. I missed the life we'd built together, flawed as it was. And maybe, just maybe, I missed her. 2 months had passed since that night, and I still felt like I was standing in the wreckage of my own life. The days blurred together, filled with work and empty nights at the motel. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the image of Lisa sitting in front of that camera. But as much as I wanted to hate her, the anger had started to fade. In its place was a heavy, aching sadness. I missed her. I missed the life we had before everything fell apart. I missed her laugh, her presence, and the simple comfort of knowing she was there. Her messages kept coming, each one tugging at my defenses. I ignored most of them, but a few stuck in my mind. "I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I can be better. You're my everything. Please don't give up on us. I can't imagine my life without you." It wasn't just her words, though. She'd reached out to mutual friends, even my parents, pleading with them to talk to me. My mom called one night, her voice soft and understanding. "Honey, I know you're hurting," she said. "But sometimes people make mistakes. Big ones. If she's truly sorry and willing to change, maybe it's worth giving her a chance." I wasn't ready to hear it then, but the words stayed with me. Finally, one Saturday evening, I found myself parked outside our house. My hands gripped the steering wheel as I stared at the front door. The windows glowed warmly, a stark contrast to the cold emptiness I'd been living in. My heart pounded as I climbed out of the car and approached the door. I hadn't told Lisa I was coming, afraid that if I gave her any warning, I'd lose my nerve. When I stepped inside, the house was quiet. The familiar scent of vanilla candles greeted me, and for a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. But then I saw her. Lisa was sitting on the couch, a blanket draped over her lap and a book in her hands. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes widened in shock. "You're here," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm here," I said, my own voice barely audible. She stood slowly, the book slipping from her fingers as she took a hesitant step toward me. "Does this mean?" "It means I want to talk," I interrupted. "But don't read too much into it." Lisa nodded, her expression a mix of relief and uncertainty. "Of course," she said quickly. "Whatever you need." We sat down, the silence between us heavy and awkward. I didn't know where to start, but Lisa spoke first. "I've been a mess without you," she said, her voice breaking. "Every day, I wake up and regret what I did. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I've been hoping, praying, you'd give me a chance to make things right." I studied her face, searching for any sign of deceit or insincerity. All I saw was pain and desperation. "Why?" I finally asked. "Why did you do it, Lisa?" She looked down, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know," she admitted. "I was stupid and selfish. The money seemed like an easy way to fix things, but I didn't think about what it would cost. I didn't think about what I'd lose." "You didn't think about me?" I said bluntly. "I did," she whispered. "Every second I thought about you, and that's why it hurts so much now. I betrayed the one person who means everything to me. If I could take it back, I would. You have no idea how much I hate myself for what I've done." I leaned back, her words swirling in my mind. I didn't trust her, not yet, but the sincerity in her voice, the raw vulnerability, made me wonder if there was a chance to salvage what we had. "I'm not saying I forgive you," I said slowly. "Support the channel with a subscription, it really makes a difference. And I'm not saying things will go back to how they were. But I can't keep living like this. I need to see if there's anything left worth saving." Lisa nodded vigorously, her hands trembling as she wiped her tears. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. "Counseling, therapy, anything. I just want to fix this. I just want to fix us." I didn't reply, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. For now, all I knew was that I was home. Coming back wasn't easy. Every room in the house felt like a battlefield, each corner hiding a memory of the betrayal. Lisa was cautious, tiptoeing around me as though afraid that one wrong word might send me packing again. I didn't blame her for being on edge. I was barely holding it together myself. First, we barely spoke. I'd get up, make coffee, and leave for work without more than a nod in her direction. She'd linger in the kitchen, her eyes filled with hope that I'd say something, anything. But I couldn't force words where trust had been shattered. The first breakthrough came during one of those silent mornings. Lisa placed a cup of coffee in front of me. "I made it the way you like," she said softly, her voice trembling. I looked at her, then at the coffee, the simple gesture pulling at a part of me I thought was gone. "Thanks," I murmured, taking a sip. It wasn't much, but it was a start. From there, the walls between us began to crack. Lisa insisted on going to therapy, something she'd suggested the night I returned. I reluctantly agreed, though I wasn't convinced it would help. Our first session was awkward, filled with long silences and uncomfortable truths. "I need you to be honest," the therapist said, her calm voice cutting through the tension. "What do you want from each other moving forward?" "I want to trust her again," I said after a long pause. "I don't know if I can, but I want to try." Lisa's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. "I want to prove that I can be better," she said. "I know I hurt him. I know I broke something that might never heal. But I'll spend the rest of my life making it right if I have to." It wasn't a magical fix. Therapy didn't erase the betrayal or the pain, but it gave us a place to talk without tearing each other apart. Slowly, we started finding common ground. At home, Lisa made an effort to rebuild the trust she'd destroyed. She deleted every app and account tied to her gaming world, cutting off all contact with the people she'd once spent hours talking to. She left her phone unlocked and her schedule transparent, offering full access to her life without me even asking. "I don't want any secrets between us," she said one evening as she handed me her phone. "If you ever feel like you need to check, it's all here." I hesitated before taking it, the gesture both comforting and painful. I didn't want to live a life where I felt the need to monitor her, but at the same time, her willingness to let me showed that she was trying. The nights were the hardest. I still couldn't sleep in our bed without the memories creeping in. Lisa offered to sleep on the couch, but I refused. "This is my house too," I told her. "I'm not giving up my space." Instead, we compromised. I took the guest room and she stayed in the bedroom. It wasn't ideal, but it gave us the distance we needed to heal. As the weeks turned into months, small moments of normalcy began to reappear. We started having dinner together again, the silences between us slowly filling with conversation. One night, she even laughed at one of my dumb jokes, and for a brief moment it felt like the old us. We spent more time together outside of the house, finding neutral ground where the memories didn't weigh as heavily. Walks in the park, quiet lunches at our favorite cafe, even a trip to the movies. These outings weren't about forgetting the past, they were about building something new. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Lisa broke the silence. "I don't deserve this chance," she said, her voice barely audible. "But I'm so grateful you're giving it to me." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in months, I saw the woman I fell in love with, not the person who betrayed me, but the person who was trying every day to make up for it. "It's not easy," I admitted finally. "Some days I don't know if I made the right choice coming back. But I'm here and I'm trying. That has to count for something." Lisa nodded, her hand reaching out tentatively to rest on mine. I didn't pull away. For the first time since the night everything fell apart, I felt a sliver of hope. As the months went on, Lisa and I began to settle into a new rhythm. It wasn't perfect, not by a long shot, but it was progress. The little things started to matter again. Her asking how my day was, me surprising her with her favorite takeout, moments of quiet understanding that reminded us of the connection we once had. Therapy sessions became less tense, though they were still challenging. One day, the therapist asked us to discuss what forgiveness would look like for both of us. I don't know if I can ever fully forgive, I admitted, my voice steady but firm. It's not just the betrayal, it's the fact that I was blindsided. I thought we were partners, but you made decisions that tore us apart. Lisa nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I know. I don't expect forgiveness overnight. I just want you to see that I'm here, that I'm not going anywhere, and that I'm willing to do the work. That session was a turning point. For the first time, I felt like we weren't just surviving, we were rebuilding. At home, Lisa continued to show me she was serious about change. She started journaling, pouring her thoughts onto paper instead of bottling them up. She even joined a support group for people working through infidelity, something she admitted was terrifying but necessary. One evening, as I came home from work, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, her journal open in front of her. She looked up, her face a mix of determination and vulnerability. "Do you want to read this?" she asked, sliding the journal toward me. I hesitated. "Are you sure? I need you to understand where my head was," she said softly. "Even if it's ugly." I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding as I read her raw, unfiltered thoughts. She wrote about her guilt, her shame, and the moments that led to her decision that night. But what stood out the most was her unwavering remorse and her desperate desire to make things right. "I never stopped loving you," she wrote in one entry. "Even at my worst, you were always in my heart. I just didn't know how to face my own insecurities, and I hurt the person I love most because of it." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I set the journal down, unable to read any further. "That's enough," I said, my voice cracking. "I get it." Lisa watched me closely, her hands trembling. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for all of it." "I know," I said, the words heavier than I expected. "And I'm trying to believe you." We sat in silence for a while, the weight of everything we'd been through hanging between us. But for the first time, the silence didn't feel like a void. It felt like a bridge. Over time, we started making plans again. Small ones at first, like spending Sundays trying new recipes or tackling a home project together. These little goals gave us something to focus on besides the past. One afternoon, as we were repainting the guest room, Lisa turned to me with a cautious smile. "Do you think we'll ever get back to how we were before?" I paused, the paintbrush hovering mid-stroke. "I don't think we can go back," I said honestly. "But maybe that's okay. Maybe we can build something new." Her smile widened, and for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of genuine hope. Our relationship wasn't healed, it was far from it. But we were learning how to navigate the wreckage together, one step at a time. Life was far from perfect, but Lisa and I had finally found a tentative balance. Days passed without major arguments, and while the wounds were still fresh, they weren't bleeding anymore. Instead, they lingered like scars, painful but manageable. One Friday evening, Lisa surprised me. "I was thinking," she began hesitantly, setting a plate of pasta in front of me. "Maybe we could get away for a weekend. Just the two of us." I raised an eyebrow, unsure how to respond. It had been so long since we'd done anything remotely close to a vacation. The idea seemed both appealing and terrifying. "I don't know," I admitted. "Things have been okay lately. I'm not sure I want to risk upsetting that by going somewhere new." Lisa nodded, her face falling slightly. "I understand. It was just a thought." But later that night, as I lay awake in bed, the idea gnawed at me. Maybe a change of scenery was exactly what we needed. The house was filled with too many memories, both good and bad. A getaway could offer a chance to reconnect without the constant reminders of our past mistakes. The next morning, I found Lisa in the kitchen. "Let's do it," I said, leaning against the counter. Her eyes lit up. Really? Are you sure? Yeah, I replied with a small smile. But let's keep it simple. Nothing too extravagant. By the following weekend, we were on the road, heading to a cabin Lisa had found a few hours away. It wasn't anything fancy. Support the channel with a subscription, it really makes a difference. Just a cozy place tucked away in the woods with a small lake nearby. But it was quiet, and for once, we didn't have the distractions of work, technology, or painful memories hanging over us. The first day was awkward. We spent most of it walking along the lake in near silence, both of us unsure how to act. It wasn't until we started making dinner that the tension began to ease. Do you remember the first time we cooked together? Lisa asked as she chopped vegetables. I chuckled. How could I forget? You burned the pasta, and the smoke alarm went off. Lisa laughed, the sound warm and genuine. And you tried to fix it by dumping hot sauce on everything. That was ambitious. It worked, didn't it? I teased. Barely, she replied with a grin. The shared memory brought a sense of nostalgia, a glimpse of the life we used to have. For the first time in what felt like forever, the laughter came easily. That night, as we sat on the cabin's porch under a blanket of stars, Lisa spoke up. Thank you for doing this, she said softly. I know it wasn't easy for you to agree. It wasn't, I admitted. But I think we needed this. She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling slightly. I don't want to rush you or push you, but I hope you can see that I'm trying. I'll never stop trying. I looked at her, the sincerity in her eyes cutting through the lingering doubt in my heart. I do see it, I said after a long pause. And I'm trying too. But you need to understand, it's going to take time. I know, she whispered. I just want you to know that I'll wait as long as it takes. The next day felt lighter, as if some invisible weight had been lifted. We spent hours exploring the woods, talking about everything and nothing. There were moments of silence, but they felt comfortable, not strained. One evening, we decided to go out on the lake in a rented canoe. As we paddled across the calm water, Lisa suddenly stopped and let her oar rest on her lap. What is it? I asked, noticing her expression. I've been thinking a lot about what the therapist said, she began. About rebuilding trust. I know words only go so far, and I know actions matter more. But I want you to know that I'm all in. No matter how long it takes, I'll keep showing you that I'm here, that I'm not going to mess this up again. Her words hung in the air, the stillness of the lake amplifying their weight. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. I want to believe you, I said finally. And maybe, little by little, I'm starting to. Lisa's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she smiled. That's all I can ask for. That trip didn't solve all our problems, but it gave us something we desperately needed. Hope. For the first time, it felt like we weren't just surviving. We were moving forward, one careful step at a time. 6 months had passed since the cabin trip, and things were beginning to feel almost normal again. Lisa and I weren't fully healed. There were still moments of doubt, flashes of insecurity, but we had come a long way. We laughed more, argued less, and even started talking about future plans. When my brother announced his wedding in another country, I saw it as a chance to take another step forward. I'll only be gone a few days, I told Lisa as we packed my suitcase together. She smiled, though her hands trembled slightly as she folded one of my shirts. I'll miss you, she said, but it'll be good for you to spend time with your family. I kissed her forehead, reassured by the softness in her gaze. We'll FaceTime every night, I promised. The morning of my flight, I left the house feeling hopeful. Things were finally starting to make sense again. I had no idea how quickly that hope would come crashing down. At the airport, chaos reigned. Flights were being delayed left and right due to severe weather conditions. After hours of waiting, an announcement came. My flight had been rescheduled for 2 days later. Frustrated but resigned, I grabbed my luggage and headed back home. It was nearly midnight when I pulled into our driveway. The house was dark, save for a faint glow coming from the living room window. I smiled to myself, thinking Lisa had probably stayed up to watch TV, waiting for news about my flight. Quietly, I unlocked the door, not wanting to wake her if she'd fallen asleep. But as I stepped inside, something felt off. The faint murmur of voices reached my ears. Low, intimate, unmistakably not coming from a television. Frowning, I made my way toward the source of the sound. My heart pounded harder with each step, a sinking feeling growing in my chest. When I reached the edge of the living room, I froze. There they were. Lisa and him, the man from the monitor all those months ago. They were on the couch, tangled together, their bodies bare and glistening in the dim light of the room. His hands roamed over her as if he owned her. His lips pressed against her neck, her shoulders, her chest. She moaned softly, arching into him, completely oblivious to the fact that I was standing just feet away. My stomach churned, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and disbelief. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving me gasping in silent horror. This couldn't be real. After everything we'd been through, after all her promises, she was doing this again. This time, right in our home. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, barely aware of what I was doing. My hands shook as I hit the record button, the camera capturing every damning detail. The intimacy between them was shameless, brazen. She whispered something into his ear, and he laughed, his voice low and cocky. "You're even better than I remembered," he murmured, his words slicing through me like a blade. Lisa giggled, her fingers tracing patterns along his back. "I told you it'd be worth the wait." I couldn't stand to watch another second, but I didn't move. My feet felt rooted to the spot, my heart a chaotic drumbeat in my chest. The betrayal was so raw, so complete, that it was almost numbing. The woman I had worked so hard to forgive, to trust again, was here, tearing down everything we had rebuilt as if it meant nothing. Finally, the rage boiled over. I cleared my throat loudly, the sound breaking through their laughter like a gunshot. Lisa's head whipped around, her eyes widening in horror as they met mine. "Oh my God!" she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man scrambled to cover himself, his arrogance evaporating as he grabbed a nearby throw blanket. "Hey man, don't you dare!" I growled, my voice trembling with fury. Lisa stood, clutching a pillow to her chest as if it could shield her from the storm about to break. "I can explain," she stammered, tears already forming in her eyes. "Explain," I repeated, my voice dripping with disbelief. I held up my phone, the screen still recording. "What part of this are you planning to explain, Lisa? The lies? The betrayal? Or the fact that you brought him into our home?" She started to speak, but I cut her off. "No, I don't want to hear it. I don't want another word from you." Turning to the man, I spat, "Get out, now." He didn't argue, grabbing his clothes and bolting for the door. Lisa stood frozen, tears streaming down her face as I turned back to her. "You're disgusting," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And you've just destroyed any chance we had left." Without waiting for a response, I walked out the door, slamming it shut behind me. The drive away from the house that night was a blur. My mind raced with emotions I couldn't even begin to untangle. Rage, heartbreak, humiliation. By the time I reached the motel I'd checked into months ago, I was shaking. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at my phone. The video I'd recorded played on a loop in my mind. Every laugh, every touch, every word Lisa had shared with him cut deeper into me. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a mockery of everything I had worked so hard to rebuild. The next morning, Lisa's calls began. My phone buzzed endlessly, her name flashing on the screen every few minutes. I ignored them at first, letting them pile up in my missed calls. When the voicemails started, I listened to the first one out of morbid curiosity. "Please, let me explain." Her voice cracked, thick with tears. "I made a horrible mistake. I wasn't thinking. I'll do anything to make it right. Just talk to me." I deleted the message without responding. Over the next few days, Lisa didn't let up. She sent texts, left voicemails, even reached out to my parents, pleading with them to convince me to come home. It didn't mean anything, one message read. I wasn't thinking clearly. I panicked when you left and I made a mistake. Please, don't throw everything away because of this. The irony of her words stung. She'd already thrown everything away the moment she let that man back into her life. I decided I wasn't going to let her manipulate me with her tears and apologies this time. I had the evidence, the truth, and it was time for the world to see what she had done. With a few quick taps on my phone, I uploaded the video to a popular social media platform, leaving the caption simple but damning, "The truth always comes out." I linked it to my personal profile, ensuring anyone connected to me or Lisa would see it. I knew it was cruel, but at that moment I didn't care. She had humiliated me in the most intimate way imaginable, and I wanted her to feel even a fraction of what I felt. Within hours, the video started gaining traction. People from our town began sharing it, leaving comments that ranged from shock to outright brutal. Lisa's name was on everyone's lips, and it wasn't long before I started getting messages from mutual friends. "Dude, is this real? I can't believe she did this to you. I always thought she was sketchy, but this? Wow." The fallout was swift. By the end of the day, Lisa's pristine public image was shattered. She called me in a panic, her voice shaking with desperation. "How could you do this to me?" she cried. "Do you have any idea what this is going to do to my life?" "Your life?" I snapped. "You're worried about your life, Lisa? What about mine? What about the life you destroyed when you decided I wasn't enough?" Her sobs on the other end of the line were almost satisfying. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," she pleaded. "Please take it down. People are already messaging me. They're saying horrible things. My boss found out. I could lose everything." "Good," I said coldly. "Maybe now you'll understand what it feels like to lose everything." Over the next few days, Lisa's life crumbled around her. Friends stopped responding to her messages, and her coworkers treated her like a pariah. She became the subject of cruel memes and jokes, her name synonymous with betrayal. One day, I got a message from a mutual friend who still had some sympathy for her. "She's not doing well," they said. "She hasn't left the house in days. I think she's breaking down." Part of me felt a pang of guilt, but it was quickly buried by the memory of what I'd walked in on, of how she had lied and manipulated me over and over again. Lisa continued to text me, her messages growing more desperate by the day. "I'll do anything to fix this," one read. "I'll move away if you want me to. Just please stop. Please take it down." But I didn't respond. I was done being the fool who believed her promises. The video stayed online and Lisa became infamous. She'd wanted to live her double life, to enjoy the thrill of sneaking around. Now, her entire life was laid bare for everyone to see. And I finally felt like I had reclaimed a small piece of power in the aftermath of her betrayal. The weeks that followed were eerily quiet. Lisa's attempts to contact me gradually faded, replaced by an absence I could feel but not quite process. The video I'd posted had done its work. Her life was in tatters, her reputation irreparably damaged. And while part of me reveled in the justice of it all, another part felt. I started hearing snippets from mutual friends. Lisa had quit her job after facing humiliation from her coworkers. She'd moved in with her mother, spending most days behind closed doors. One friend even told me she'd deleted all her social media accounts, unable to handle the relentless flood of ridicule and judgment. At first, I told myself it didn't matter. She'd brought this on herself. Every tear she cried was a consequence of her own choices. But late at night, alone in the silence of my new apartment, doubts crept in. Was I any better for having exposed her? Had I crossed a line, becoming someone I didn't recognize in the process? One day, I received a letter in the mail. It was from Lisa. The envelope was plain, the handwriting shaky. For a moment, I considered throwing it away, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened it and began to read. "I know I don't deserve for you to read this," it began, "but I need to try. I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my dignity, but nothing compares to losing you. I don't blame you for what you did. I hurt you in the worst way possible, and I'll live with that for the rest of my life." Her words were raw, filled with pain and regret. She didn't try to justify her actions or make excuses. Instead, she admitted to every mistake, every lie, every moment of selfishness. "I don't expect forgiveness," she wrote, "but I want you to know that I am truly, deeply sorry. You gave me so many chances, and I threw them away because I was too weak, too selfish to see what I had. I hope one day, when the anger fades, you'll remember the good times we shared. If nothing else, I want to thank you for loving me, even when I didn't deserve it." The letter ended with a simple plea: "Please take care of yourself. You deserve to be happy, even if it's not with me." I folded the letter and set it aside, unsure of how to feel. Her words didn't erase the pain she caused, but they stirred something I hadn't expected: closure. For so long, I'd carried the weight of her betrayal, letting it consume me. But reading her words, I realized I didn't have to carry it anymore. The next day, I logged onto my account and deleted the video. It wasn't for Lisa, it was for me. I didn't want to be tethered to the anger and revenge that had defined my life for so many months. Moving forward wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I threw myself into work, reconnected with friends I'd lost touch with, and even started seeing someone new. She was kind, understanding, and patient. Everything I needed as I tried to piece myself back together. As for Lisa, I didn't hear from her again after the letter. I imagined her rebuilding her life in her own way, far from the wreckage we'd left behind. I didn't hate her anymore. In time, the anger softened into something quieter, less consuming. Looking back, I realized that the betrayal didn't define me. It hurt deeply, but it also forced me to grow, to understand my own worth, and to rebuild a life I could be proud of. And that, I decided, was the best revenge of all. Support the channel with a subscription. It really makes a difference.